Ill. If you don't watch until the end of the video, you're going to step on a Lego. Okay, I already reminded everybody last time, but if you didn't see, I did make this Discord that somebody wanted, and I didn't want this, but you wanted it, so if you don't use it, then that's rude. You wasted my time. I'm just kidding, I don't care. Alright. What's the gist? Well, I'm gonna talk about different series. This series today is not your typical reincarnation story. Spoiler alert, it is your typical reincarnation story. But what's the gist? I'm gonna give you a rating, and then I'm going to go into why I gave you that rating. Not really going to go into any spoilers, it's always going to be just general stuff. For this story, I'm gonna give it a 7. It's alright. Really doesn't do anything out of the ordinary, but I think it does what it wants to do pretty well. So, I'm not going to say it's terrible or anything. It's just kind of alright. If you have some time, I think it's worth a read, but I don't necessarily think it's something that you're going to be jumping at the bit to get. So, what's the general idea? Well, the main character is, it's the whole villainess idea, right? And it is an isekai, they were reincarnated, they're trying to change their fate, right? Because they're the villainess. And typical hijinks ensue, right? She struggles to change her fate. Characters are, not necessarily quick to change. There's this higher power that's, trying to halt her progress and make things harder for her. Your generic isekai reincarnation story tropes. It's like, oh, it's the, marriage of convenience idea. He doesn't really like her, she doesn't like him, their families hate each other. The generic idea. I will say the story's a little dark at times. The main character, like her original, the original villain, right, was severely abused in the original story, but no one necessarily knew that. So they kind of perceived her as being this, evil mastermind, when in reality she was just, this abused, mistreated girl that was forced to do a whole bunch of different terrible acts by her family. So we kind of unravel that mystery and seeing, like, what her previous life was like, what was happening during that, how brutal it was, and what she had to go through. And you kind of get sprinkles of that throughout the story. Not super unique in terms of, like, concepts. I mean, we see that a lot where it's kind of like the tragic villain. And it kind of warps their personality. Yeah, okay. Pretty typical. Pretty typical. I guess, like, the draw for this series is, there's like like I said before, like a puppet master that's kind of, pulling the strings of all the different characters. And basically, she can accomplish certain tasks to reduce, this puppet master's ability to impact the story. So the more she completes these tasks, the more she can, form better relationships with these characters, and they don't get influenced by this puppet master. Once again, I have seen similar ideas before. I think it's a well-done version of this concept, but the idea is not in and of itself unique. Can't really give it too much credit there. What else is there to say? Well, as far as other characters go, of course we have the main character, who's the villain in the original story. We have the male lead, who is the brother of the, well, I guess you could say it's kind of like an adopted brother of the original female lead. On that note, we have the female lead. And then I think the other prominent character would be the second brother, who is a secondary male lead in the original story. What's the general idea? Well, the main character, of course, is trying to influence the story and better the relationships with each of these characters. But like I said, there's that puppet master that's, controlling all the different characters. So it's kind of impeding the relationships. They don't trust her because her family's pretty bad. And they assume that she's this puppet master, right? There's this facade that she is a, mastermind of being evil and things like that. When in reality, again, she's just a victim. So they're kind of unwilling to take her side. And the idea is, like I said, those strings slowly get released, and then she gets a little more influence on the story, and she can slowly start to change their minds. Now, the early parts of the story are very brutal, because no one really likes her. The story is naturally designed for her to be the, bad guy. So they are not really willing to compromise and, take her side. So if something bad happens, they just blame her, they don't trust her. And you see that a lot in the original, probably like 30, 40 chapters. Like you're really going to see, it's a little rough to read. If you don't like seeing the main character constantly put down, it is going to be kind of hard. I think this story does break into one aspect that I think I might do a pet peeves on, where there's this idea of forgiveness in a lot of these stories. Like, oh, there's this bond that's created, and now the main character forgives that person. I think this story is a little bit of an example of how this forgiveness is too easily given. These characters treat her horribly throughout the story. Even if she doesn't do anything, they're written to hate her, and they hate her. So until those reins are let loose, they're going to keep hating her. So it's kind of like... And then when you see her forgive someone for how they've treated her, when they really don't do much to end that relationship, I feel like that takes me out of it. I don't necessarily like that too much. I feel like, forgiveness is something that's earned. It's not something that's just given haphazardly. So I find that a little rough. Now, I do think the bond between this story's female lead and male lead is relatively nice once everything starts to get sorted out and we see things progress. But it is hard to accept when you see that bond form. It's a little dicey. You also see, like, abusive relationships with her family and things like that, and then, like, she just cuts them off, so why is she not cutting off the people that are treating her so poorly? I think, really, I don't want to get into any, like, actual story points, but I think just general ideas-wise, some noteworthy things would be the female lead and the secondary male lead, which is, it's common in these kinds of stories, they kind of slowly become more villainous, right? It's kind of like, oh, the true colors idea. In this case, it's kind of like she was given everything, he wanted, to help her and give her everything, and now that she doesn't have the attention and love that's unrealistic, typically, she slowly starts to be a little more evil. Which is, again, typical. I think it's okay in its execution. I don't necessarily think it stands out to me. But I can't complain with it. It's I can't complain about it. It's just a fine concept that is done in an okay way. But it is not unique, and I think you need something unique to really keep a story going, and I really don't think this story has it, even though it's trying to make it seem like it does with this whole typical reincarnation thing. I think if you wanted to make this title more accurate, you get rid of that "not" and just put "your typical reincarnation story." But, you know, whatever. I think we'll end it on the old SAE. What is the SAE? Well, it's story, art, enjoyment. In terms of story, I think between a 6 and a 7 is fair. It doesn't do anything groundbreaking, but it does everything relatively well, with a few moments of issues, I guess you could say. Art-wise, I think it's pretty good. It's, you know, if a 5 is average, a 6 is like slightly above average, I would say this is like a 7. It's solid art. Like, I would say it is good. As far as enjoyment goes, I think it'd be between a 6 and a 7. It's certainly not bad, but at times it can be a little bit obnoxious, a little annoying. So, like, you get a little bit of that 6 going at times, more so than the 7. You know, just like how over here you might get a 6 or a 7. You know, it's a little bit of a toss-up at times how much you're going to enjoy it. I think I read a lot. I think it was somewhere in the ballpark of like 80 chapters or so for this. So, I mean, there's a lot of ups and downs in terms of quality. I mean, I think if I had to give it a general rating, again, it would be between a 6 and a 7 for sure. You know, I think I would still lean toward the 7. Like, I feel like it definitely... I think the art is very consistently like a 7. So I think there's quality there. The enjoyment I don't think is as consistent. It definitely skips back and forth. And then as far as story goes, I would say it leans more consistently toward that 7 mark. So I would say it's between a 6 and a 7, of course, but I think it certainly leans toward the 7. But I think that's about it. I just wanted to talk about the story briefly, you know, give you an idea. Yeah, it's about a 6 or a 7. I think it's worth a read if you see it, but I don't think it's something you have to go out of your way to go look at. I'd appreciate if you could like, comment, subscribe, maybe leave another story that you want me to read down below. Even if I've read it, I'll read it again, that's fine. Yeah, I'll see you.